When you think of some of the major battles on the Western Front in World War I that led to some of the most horrific death and destruction, well, your mind might go to places like the Somme or Passchendaele. Well, what if I told you that there was a battle that was geographically in between those two places that actually resulted in more deaths per day than either one of those battles? Well, that is what happened right around the city where I am right now in Arras. Well, like I said, right now I am in the city of Arras, and this was the location of a major battle in early 1917. So why was it that there was such a large battle that was fought right here? Well, 1916 had been a very hard year for the Allies. They had gone through the Battle of Verdun and the Battle of the Somme. And as the spring was approaching in 1917, well, there was a plan where the French were going to attack around the Chemin des Dames, and to basically draw German troops away, the French requested that the British launch an attack right here in Arras. Right now we are in Arras in the early morning, and we've got out here before many of the crowds have got out and started stirring around the city. So it's quite peaceful here in the city right now. Well, in the spring of 1917, this place would have looked much different. War would have already visited this city, and a lot of these buildings that we are looking at right now would have had massive amounts of destruction. You would have had a lot of people who were honestly just coming out at night when it was a little bit safer. I heard one account that talked about how this city became like a hub of activity as soon as the sun went down. Well, as the spring offensive was approaching in April of 1917, Arras became kind of the hub that the British Army was feeding its troops into to get ready for this big offensive against the Germans. And again, just looking at this city, it would have looked much different for the troops who were coming through here. Now, I mentioned how soldiers would have been fed through this city. And, I mean, if you look at the photos of the destruction around Arras, it's not necessarily the safest place. So what the British Army did was they started utilizing some ancient quarries that are beneath the city. These New Zealand tunnelers just found these old quarries and then started connecting them, and there was a vast underground network that tens of thousands of soldiers started moving through. Really quite remarkable. Well, one of those quarries is actually open today. It's called the Wellington Tunnels. So we're going to leave the square now, go to the Wellington Tunnels, and start exploring this underground world that the soldiers of the First World War were existing in during the Battle of Arras. All right, well, I just got in here into the museum portion of the Wellington Tunnels, and holy smokes, look who I happened to run into. Oh my gosh, it's Rob from History in Your Hand, who happens to be here at the same time as me. Actually, Rob and I are going to be kind of walking the battlefields together in some different places over the next few days. So anyway, yeah. All right, we're going to go down into the quarry here in just a little bit, but first I wanted to show a few items from their museum. So here they're showing, kind of the position of Arras in the greater context of the war, and then they have some different artifacts here. Here is an early French uniform. You can see the early French uniforms had the red pants, which is not exactly desirable when you are fighting a modern war. So this is what the French uniforms ended up looking like, with kind of this sky blue color. And then here, again, we're going to be going underground. Well, these are different items that were recovered from the quarries here in Arras, which is pretty interesting. Now, here in Arras, the primary work of tunneling was done by the New Zealand Tunneling Company. So here we see a picture of a New Zealand soldier wearing this personal respirator, which was a countermeasure that was developed so that the wearer could survive if the atmosphere became unbreathable. And here we see a few rare photos of some of these New Zealand soldiers as they are doing their work tunneling under the ground here on the Western Front. And then also they have a few artifacts. So here you can see kind of this slouch hat looking thing here that was unique to the New Zealanders. It was nicknamed a lemon squeezer. Here's an example of the personal respirator that I was just talking about. And then of course you have normal tunneling equipment, a pickaxe and a shovel and a drill. See a saw there, and you want to make sure that there is an early warning system in case things kind of go south. So this is a little cage that could hold a bird or maybe even mice that could alert these soldiers if the air was becoming unbreathable. All right, we're getting ready to dodge down into the tunnels, and there's one more quick thing that I wanted to point out that I thought was pretty interesting. This is an inscription that was left by a man named Solomon Isaacs. He was from the Cook Islands and came over with the New Zealand Tunneling Company, and when they were going through the tunnels in later years, they found his name carved into the chalk. And down below was this conch shell. So apparently Solomon brought this over with him and decided to leave it in the tunnel. That's a pretty incredible story. Right, well, that was a quick look at the museum here at Wellington Tunnel. Now we are going to go down into the quarry and learn a little bit more about the history of the beginning of the Battle of Arras. All right, we just got down here into the Wellington Tunnel, and holy smokes, this place is really something else. And they have like this kind of a light and projection show that we just looked at that kind of shows like these silhouettes moving along the wall and kind of giving you an idea of what it would have looked like down here with a bunch of these British soldiers who were kind of staging up. Now, the tunnels or the quarries were not made by the New Zealanders. These were medieval tunnels that had existed for hundreds of years prior to the war. New Zealand tunnelers are going to come in, and they are going to start making use of these and kind of connecting them and utilizing them to get soldiers to the front.
So before 1990s, these quarries and the story of the Battle of Arras was not so well known. Very few people knew about that. What happened in 1990s, the Archaeologist Service of Arras rediscovered these quarries. The purpose, it was to discover the use of limestone for the construction of Arras during Middle Ages. But when archaeologists went down this place, they rediscovered all this inscription, sometimes graffitis with 1917, so they understood that something happens during the war, and finally they rediscovered the Battle of Arras with the help of some very few people in England who knew about that battle.
We've gone off the beaten path here, and Pascal is allowing us to come in here and film some different parts of the quarry. Now, just imagine that you are a young soldier waiting down here during the First World War. And most young guys tend to get bored fairly easy and need something to occupy their time. Well, maybe you start scratching into these chalk walls. Now take a look at this. If we come over here, let me adjust my lighting just a little bit. Right here, you can see some graffiti of a soldier's profile. This was most likely a New Zealander who etched this into these chalk walls. You can tell just because of the hat and everything. But yeah, these tunnels were also used during World War II, so there's graffiti here from all different eras, but this is definitely something from the First World War. All right, here's another etching that has been made into the chalk, and I don't know how well this will show up on camera. We'll do our best here, but here you can see, now this is not one from one of the New Zealand tunnelers, but this is from a guy by the name of C. Wilby. You can see his name right there, and it says 39 Labour Company, Leicester, England, BEF. So yeah, C. Wilby made his way through this quarry. Rob, I'm not British. Do you know where Leicester, England is at?
You know, I don't.
You don't?
I mean, it sounds like an Irish name, but I'm guessing it probably is in Britain. But we can look it up. We're gonna have to find out.
No, it says England.
Yeah. Oh, does it say England?
Yeah.
There? Oh wow. No, I don't know where it is.
Come on, man. It's not like it's that big of a country. All right, quick update. It's not Leicester, England. This is Leicester, England. Once Rob looked at it and saw the spelling, he immediately knew where it was at. Where'd you say it was? Around Nottingham?
Near Nottingham, yeah.
Okay, near Nottingham in the Midlands. So that is where C. Wilby was. That just threw me off a little bit because British people pronounce things kind of strange. Rob, what do they make soda cans out of?
So
What do they make soda cans out of, Rob?
Aluminium.
No, they do not. It's aluminum.
What they make Diet Coke cans from. Yeah. Leicester, so pronounced the correct way, that is Leicester, which is in the Midlands, just near Nottingham.
These wall etchings are just so fascinating to me. Here are some initials that are carved into the wall. We aren't 100% sure what era this came from. It's possibly World War II. But if we walk down here, well, there's another etching in the wall that is definitely from the Second World War. So French citizens and refugees would come down here to escape the bombing during the Second World War. So here, see somebody to pass the time has carved this image of a woman into the wall. And then down here, you see the date, which looks to be May 19th of 1944. And then the initials there. Yeah, that is really something.
So here you can see an inscription left by New Zealanders. It is written Waitomo. Waitomo is not very well known in Europe, but if maybe one time you will visit New Zealand, it's one of the most famous places. It is a beautiful underground cave, and on the bottom there are a lot of water. And what is very famous in Waitomo, on the sky of this cave, you can see some glowworms. So it looks like you see stars in the night. So we are sure that that graffiti was left by New Zealander during World War One. And of course here it's a mix of nostalgia and joke because it's not so big as the real Waitomo cave. And here you can also see that little inscription. So OC, the name of a soldier, we don't know which one, but NZE, you can see New Zealand engineers. So you see that New Zealanders left many graffitis in these quarries.
As you're making your way through these tunnels and through the quarry, there are all these little rooms that shoot off one way or another. And here in this one, you can really get an idea of just how deep under the earth we are. This is a big cavernous room here. We're probably, Pascal said, about 20 meters below the surface, but they're at the top, probably about 5 meters before you get to the ground level. Interesting. All right, here's some more graffiti that Pascal just showed us here in the tunnels, and this is hilarious. So this is something that was originally written onto the stone by someone from the Fighting Forth London, and their motto was first on the field, last off. Well, then somebody from another regiment came along and scratched out first and last and switched them to make it last on the field, first off. That's funny. As you're making your way through these tunnels, every once in a while you'll run into like these little alcoves that have been carved out of the wall, and those aren't without purpose. Those were used like as officers' quarters and things like that. So another fascinating little detail down here. Now, as we've made our way through the quarry here, you may have noticed writing on the wall in red or black. Now, I thought that was like modern graffiti that was put here before the museum took over the tunnels. This is actually, if you see something in black, that's World War I, and in red, that is from World War II. So the New Zealanders would paint on the walls to give directions to all of the tunnels. The tunnels were all given names from places back home. So here we see like to Nelson, that would be to Nelson Tunnel, or to, I'll pronounce that Blenheim. And something else that was really quite clever is the quarries and tunnels to the north would be given northern names, and to the south would be given southern names. Something else that's really interesting, you see this wiring here. This is from World War II, and they also have this little showering system right here. This was to basically get people into a situation where if they were hit by gas, this would be like their first line of cleansing themselves. Yeah, this is all so interesting. We're continuing our walk down through the quarry here, and myself and Pascal and Rob have been standing here just kind of talking some stories from World War I. And keep in mind that these quarries were original medieval quarries, and they didn't have elevators to get down here. And Pascal just said, hey, look, and he kicked on a light, and right above us, look at this. There is the access that the people in the Middle Ages had down to this quarry. And I know you can't tell it on camera, but that is way up there. That was really, really something to see. And you can see at the top, it looks like it's kind of bricked in there. I don't know if I can focus on that or not. But anyway, yeah, so much history down here. Here on this wall, they have a projection of a map from World War I that really helps to kind of orient us as to where we are. So right up here, this is the city center of Arras. Down here, you can see with those red lines, that is the German front line. And in between, if you see these red blotches here, those are all of the quarries. So they're kind of on a couple different axes coming off of the city center of Arras. Wellington Tunnel. Pascal, could you put a dot on Wellington? Yeah, there's Wellington Tunnel, or Wellington Quarry right there. This is the one that we are in. And the New Zealanders, when they got down here and started discovering these quarries, dug tunnels to link all of these together, and then dug down to the German front lines to get access where these men could go below ground and then pop out and go on the attack rather than being above ground and risking getting cut up by artillery fire. Here's a picture of some men from the New Zealand tunneling company. And when this system was explored in the 1990s, well, look at all of the artifacts that they found. They found all the heads to these pickaxes. I'm seeing pieces of shovel. There is all kinds of stuff here, which is really fascinating to me. This was almost like a time capsule that had been locked up since the Second World War. Now, there's an interesting story behind this photo right here. Some of you may be aware of Peter Jackson, famous director of the Lord of the Rings series, and he is also really into World War I history. Did a documentary film called They Shall Not Grow Old, which I highly recommend. It's really good. He came on a tour in this tunnel, and when he came to this spot, recognized this man right here on the right. That is the great uncle of his partner. So, yeah, pretty wild that Peter Jackson was here and then looked up and recognized this guy. He has the same picture hanging, somewhere in either his office or home, he said. But yeah, very fascinating. Here's another really elaborate carving that was made into the wall here, and this soldier left a little bit of information about himself. He was in the 2nd Hampshire Regiment, and these guys were in the Battle of Arras. He fought specifically at a place called Monchy-le-Preux, which there was some heavy fighting that went down there. Newfoundland Regiment also fought there. And they came back to this quarry to kind of get rested up and then go back out into the fight. And sometime during the Battle of Arras, he made this carving. Earlier I mentioned how each tunnel had a specific name. They also had designations for the pillars. So right here we are looking at Pillar 4E. Over here, this is Pillar 4F. Again, these are helping helping people to navigate these tunnels. And take a look at this. The archaeologists who helped to open up and excavate this quarry and these tunnels found a lot of bottles. So there are water bottles, there are whiskey bottles. Here's one that Americans will be unfamiliar with because I had no idea what it was. It's something called HP sauce. Rob clued me in as to what it was. He said it's kind of like a brown ketchup was the best way that he could describe it. It's like a brown sauce of some kind. But yeah, for all of you bottle collectors, this is really, really fascinating. Soldiers who occupied these tunnels could be down here for days at a time. Well, of course, there are things that you're going to need during that time. You're going to need to sleep. So here are some reconstructed bunks that are shown in this alcove here. They also have some cookware. Now, this may or may not have been in the tunnels. They may have done cooking elsewhere, here in the quarry. And then also, if you look, well, sometimes you'll see this WC on the wall. Well, that doesn't stand for Wellington anything. That stands for water closet. Now, again, this is in red, so this was from the Second World War. So if we go over here in this little nook, well, here is a reconstructed water closet or latrine from the First World War. And I would have to think that these things would have been some kind of nasty down here in this closed off space. We've come to the part of the quarry that is getting to the battalion headquarters, and there is a really, really fascinating story associated with this specific spot. So you can see there on the projection a drawing. This was discovered in the archives of the London Gazette. So the Battle of Arras takes place on April 9th. April 8th was Easter Sunday, and there was a drawing that was made that, again, was posted in the London Gazette showing a service that took place right here. So in the drawing, you can see maybe where it says 5E on the drawing. Well, here's pillar 5E. That is really something else. And then if we continue on around the bend here, well, here is the battalion HQ. Here's another real interesting etching into the wall here. If you were dwelling down here in these quarries, you might start thinking that you had a lot in common with a caveman. So somebody etched this woolly mammoth into the wall. Here's another New Zealand marking, and this one is a little bit different. You can see this darkness around here. Pascal was just telling us that sometimes what soldiers would do is they would take a candle and they would scorch the surface of the wall and then take a bayonet or whatever and carve their etching into it so that it would stand out a little more. Here's another one of these inscriptions where you can see the wall has been scorched to make the etchings stand out a little bit more. What makes this one kind of unique and special, you can see the name there, Toi Carini. He's from Tulago Bay in New Zealand. This is one of the Maori who came over with the New Zealanders. And then there's another etching right here. This is also from one of the Maori New Zealanders. A lot of these guys who were doing the tunneling work down here below the surface, anytime they dug a tunnel, well, they wanted to let people know who had been there and who had done the digging. So here's an inscription that really stands out well to a guy by the name of Blackwell. You see another one up here. Looks like the guy's name is P. Shannon. And this one doesn't really stand out as much. You can kind of make out a C right there. There is a T. This is a guy by the name of T. Collins, and apparently he didn't like the work that he had started right here. So he came over here to the other side and finished it and did a little bit neater job here. I don't know how well you can see that, but you can see T. Collins. Pascal was saying that he's been in other quarries, and this Collins guy left his name everywhere he went. He has seen his name in multiple places, which is hilarious. One of the concerns that you might have being underground like this is access to water. Well, the solution is to dig a well. So this is a well that is dug below the surface down here in this quarry. And then there was a pump that brought water, really clean, good water, into this reservoir here. So this is actually better water than what most soldiers were getting up on the surface. And one other thing that I'll show here, if you look through here, well, here's an example of one of the carts that the New Zealanders would use to excavate rock in this chalk and open up the tunnels. And then here we have a very well-preserved example of one of the tunnels that these New Zealanders dug to connect to another quarry just down the way there. Fascinating. All right, we've reached the end of the tunnel, and right now we're standing at one of the exits here, going up. Now, this tunnel right here, or this quarry, the Wellington Quarry, could hold 1,500 men. Across all of the quarries around the perimeter of Arras, you had 24,000 men on April the 9th waiting to go up through these exits and over the top and into the German lines. So just for a moment, I want you to imagine being one of these soldiers, and you are ascending these steps to go out one of these exits, or one very much like it, and what is waiting for you when you hit daylight is going to be unlike anything you've ever seen or experienced before. I can't even imagine how these guys must have felt as they were getting ready to exit these tunnels. Man, this place has been something else. All right, well, we have made our way out of the Wellington Tunnels, and I have to say, I've been to a lot of cool places. That was mind-blowing. Pretty amazing to see how these British soldiers and these New Zealand tunnelers were living during the First World War in preparation for the Battle of Arras. We've got a lot more that is coming from this battle and from this sector. But anyway, for now, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next place.